So first off, let's see. My name is Mark Sherwood. I am responsible for the Unified Communications and Video Services IT organization at Cisco Systems. First off, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I think this is the last session in this room, so hopefully it goes out big. Anyway, I think what one of the gentlemen in the back said is that what we're doing here is standing in between you and the alcohol. So he was a little bit more specific as to drink choice, but anyway, it's always a difficult place to be. So in between you and food or drink is always a challenging place. But thanks for joining. So today we're going to talk about creating an internal content delivery network for you to support your video deployments. So, and I am fortunate enough to be joined today by a great panel here. So first off, starting to my left is Patty Perkins, and Patty Perkins is Internal Communications Solution Team Leader at Wells Fargo. Next is Sumandra Majhi, Architect for F5 Networks, and all the way at the end is Greg Poulier, how did I do on the name? President and founder of Media Platform. So what I'd like to do first is give each of them a little bit of an opportunity, maybe 5 minutes or so, just to tell you a little bit about themselves, what their responsibility is, and then anything they want to share specific to CDN implementations at their own companies. And then I've got a number of questions to continue to kind of pelter them with as we move forward, but I'd also like to open it up to the audience. If there are questions that you all have, you don't necessarily have to wait till the end. Feel free to ask those questions during the time. It won't be an interruption. I don't think we have mics, so I will do the best job to try and repeat the question to make sure that those that are watching on video do have an opportunity to hear what the question was asked. So, Patty, if you want to get us started here.
I'll start. And I'll apologize in advance for those of you that were in yesterday's session that I was on the panel for, because we were kind of talking about the same thing, but I'm going to try to give you a little bit more perspective and a little bit more deeper insight into how we got where we got. I manage the internal communications solutions team for the Wells Fargo Video Network. And initially, we were the folks that managed the on-demand service of our video content delivery. And my responsibilities have grown all the way out now to encompass internal communications and the technology and products that support the work that they do. And so we provide the technology and solutions support for these various products that support the work of internal communications and the video network. And so we came to that from, as I mentioned yesterday, 15 years, 3 banks, and 1 great boss was my posting on Facebook just recently. It's been 15 years ago that we sat down and started talking about a content delivery network at First Union. How are we going to do this? We had this great, rich video content that we were doing over the satellite. How could we repurpose that somehow? So this conversation is not a new one. For me and my group, and we've evolved over the years to a real blended sort of solution that we can go into more detail when we start talking about applications and how we spread it out. But it has been, it was the dream of the guy who created the video network that we would get our content on the desktop, and we did finally accomplish that before he passed away, and that was a very satisfying thing, but we've managed to do it. We sure have learned a lot along the way.
Great. Thank you, Patty.
So I'm probably a little bit of an odd person in this group because I'm actually from product development. So I don't run a network, but I get to talk to a lot of people who actually have a lot of problems on the network. And because of my background, when you look at the video, video in a way actually represents one of the uglier applications to the network. They want to hog the bandwidth, they want to always have the reliability, they want the latency. These are all bad things that if you talk to any network operator, even the people like us who are actually designing these devices to work, these are very difficult to do when you have queues and routings and the path can move from one set to another. Having a fixed certain quality to be maintained over a long period of time, it's a hard problem. So it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, it's a great business opportunity for us. So most of the time when I'm in this panel, I'll be actually talking from experiences that I heard from other people. So one of the things I learned talking to a lot of the people is this. In case of video, it's often the experience, and the experience is basically given by the fact is that is there a freeze frame? Is there a lot of jitter? So is there any such thing when somebody picked up the phone or talked back to in an interactive session, did he get the answer in time? So what needs to happen is that I look at network as a big fat highway that's going through it. Every car has the right of the way there. What we do in F5 networks, we make a device called Big IP, which is a sort of a traffic cop. And the best way to keep the network flowing through is that knowing which cars can get on which lane and who gets to go on the highway and who gets to take the byway. So our devices, you can kind of think about what should I say? It's sort of a traffic cop which has policies that can be pre-configured, which can also have policies that can be pushed on demand. So a good example would be if between two sites somebody starts say telepresence sessions, which might be taking 12 megs of bandwidth, and if we are between, let's say, San Jose and Tel Aviv, which is pretty much all the bandwidth they have, what happens to all the other transfers that's happening? Because there's a development office there, they're actually pulling images, they're actually developing. So at that time, it will be beneficial if I can actually make an IPsec tunnel and go over the regular internet and divert it. Because, so those things takes an incredible amount of policy decisions to make, and these policies have to be dynamic. So more and more I'm actually looking video as more of it's a kind of a network issue which requires a sophisticated policy engine to actually make it worthwhile for everybody to watch it and actually have it come out with a good experience. That's pretty much my take on the state of the internet streaming.
Okay. Thank you, Samandra. Greg?
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Pillier. My company is Media Platform, and our focus is software for large companies to do everything from run live events to have libraries of content, corporate tubes as they're becoming called. And our focus is really on providing the full solution. How do we get you from where you are to being able to reach everyone at your company, internally and externally? So even though this talk is focused on the internal CDN solution, we realize that when we run into big companies, they need to solve the problem internally and externally. It may have begun that the marketing folks were running external webcast. Internally, they're using some distribution technique, maybe it's IP multicast. But in the end, very often they want to unify their solution and end up with a way where they can run highly secure, highly scalable, highly reliable webcasts to large audiences, internally and externally, which might be partners, might be advertising, might be customers, and they want to be able to do that all within the context of fully integrated enterprise software. So we've been focused on software that integrates in companies, single sign-on Active Directories, and then the ability for either media professionals to run these events and distribute it the optimized way, or even employees being able to generate content and moving towards employee-generated content. As far as today's topic is concerned, we've focused really hard on it because it's one of the big obstacles, and it's also a big opportunity for us. So historically, we would run into companies where they would say, once we solve our networking problems, we're ready to implement a video solution. Nowadays, what we run into is we need to solve our networking problems, but we already have solutions. But they're a motley crew of solutions. We have, in our headquarters, we have IP multicast. We can reach 5,000 people. In India, we have a lower bandwidth connection, but we have a lot of people behind that connection. In California, we've got some other type of distribution. Maybe we just acquired a company and they've got a Cisco distribution solution. And what we've taken is an approach that we refer to as a smart path is the term we use, and we also call it an overlay network. And what we do there is we make sure that you can use all of these different distribution solutions together. And it's not just about providing the optimal experience for people, but it's also about providing primary and backup and maybe even third layer failover, because when you have your CEO in front of a camera, the pressure is really high that it be reliable. And we are also focused on multi-language. So if someone joins from France, they should pull the French version of the stream, while someone joining from somewhere else should pull a different version of the stream. and someone joins on an iOS device, well, they have to pull a different version because they've got their own protocols for how to stream it and also how to render it. So putting that all together in a system that is not overwhelmingly crazy to actually use is what our focus is. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So there's all kinds of different applications basically to run over your CDN. So I'm curious as to what applications you're actually running, and then how widespread is the use of video, and have you seen it change over the past couple of years?
I'll take the second part first. If
Okay, of course.
If that's okay. I mentioned earlier that our corporate culture, at least on the East Coast, was very heavily video oriented. We initially started out with all the branches had VSAT and all the data went through the satellite, and then they figured out, hey, we could do broadcasts on that, and we could do video and audio and do a broadcast to the branch and actually take phone calls and do all that. So that's really how it started, was as sort of a meeting culture and a way to get engaged with their senior leaders and all that. And it just took off so well that when data went back down terrestrial for First Union, we kept the satellite strictly for video and for programming, because we had at that time then had a corporate university, which was a trend that was going on at the time. We were doing a lot of soft skills training, so we had an additional channel that we were doing training. Folks could go into a conference room and turn on the TV, dial up the learning channel and call into the phone, and we'd have 10 or 12 conference rooms all across the footprint taking the same course. And so we were able to save a lot of costs that way. So it's the traditional ROI that you saw early on with video. It just continued to move as we moved and merged with Wells Fargo, or excuse me, with Wachovia. Corporate university trend kind of went on down its way and went away, and then we began with just sort of that whole communication and that unification process of really pulling the company together as one company. And now we're taking that same concept of using video to introduce the two cultures of Wachovia and Wells Fargo. It's been highly successful, particularly on the Wells Fargo side, or the Wachovia side, because we were used to it. We wanted to see our new leaders and really experience them and hear from them and get the whole context and everything. And now we've been able to completely roll out the satellite network across all of Wells Fargo. So now we're at 6,500 receive sites. So we're the second largest corporate network next to Walmart. And that includes all of our stores, all of our North America locations. So it's an amazing way to pull together a wildly diverse set of cultures so that we can kind of get all on the same page about what our leaders are leading us to and what's expected of us. You see the normal kind of ebb and flow in the adoption. Right now we're not doing as much programming as we were doing in the former world, but that's starting to come back as people see the success of the CEO town halls. And we have the opportunity to do user-generated video to ask questions and play that back in the town hall so people feel more engaged and that type of thing. So as we go along, we truly use it for really building the one Wells Fargo concept, pulling us together as one company, providing context around what people are really most interested in. It's the same reason you all do it.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
and then the applications that we use, I mentioned 15 years ago we went back and our roots were satellite. So now currently we use Dish TV for our satellite network. And on that satellite network, we have a Team TV channel, which is all the internal corporate content. We have a weekly show called Storylines, and it is some kind of story about something that's going on internal. It could be business related, like earnings, or it could be different things that happen in the community, or a really good story, a really good customer story that everybody could learn something from. And then we also have on that channel, we have digital signage. We have an English channel and a Spanish channel. We have music on hold, messages on hold. And then something else that's really unique for an enterprise as large as ours is we have one satellite bill for the whole company to have the business suite channels like CNN and MSNBC and the Weather Channel and all that. It is all part of a stack. When you open a branch or you remodel a branch, you go in and you get the IP phones go in, the satellite system goes in, the digital signage system goes in, because part of my team also manages the digital signage. So we've been able to conglomerate all of that and ride that on that satellite system, and our IT partners love it because there's really no reason, we can't really expect to be able to pay rights fees to be able to put CNN on the LAN, and why would you want to? Mm-hmm. I mean, it just, you've got it there, and you can figure out, a way to view it and how you're going to use it. The other thing we do is all of our content on the Team TV channel is available on demand, and we use Contiki, secure peer-to-peer, to deliver that. We'll be moving into live streaming in 2013 using the secure peer-to-peer system. We have had pretty limited success with doing just traditional streaming over our network because the multicast situation, the network, the number of mergers that we've been through, the consolidations and restacks of the networks over the years, it's just been very, very difficult. So our network architect was actually the person who chose the secure peer-to-peer solution for delivering on-demand video. And so now, whenever they say, John, we want to do a webcast, he's like, call Patty. So we will be solving webcasting and all of that with the secure peer-to-peer engine, which is kind of unusual. Most people are trying to figure out how to solve it with streaming, but we just can't figure out a way how that will include, that everybody who's sort of eligible for that can get it. And then the on-demand piece of it is available to everybody. So if you're in a branch, if you're in India, you're worldwide, that's our solution for content delivery worldwide is on-demand, because you're place shifting and time shifting and all that. And we have a process in place to review all those videos and all that. I did want to mention externally, we have a YouTube channel and Facebook and Twitter. That's what we're using right now to do. We're starting to explore some of the inside-out media concepts of using all of this fabulous content that we create internally and making it available to our customers to tell the Wells Fargo story. So those are the primary components of what we're using, and our video use is worldwide.
Okay, thank you, Patty. So Sumandra and Greg, any similarities that you see with your customers or the customers you work with in terms of both the growth of CDNs as well as, what's the usage in terms of, is it more heavily swayed towards streaming versus video on demand? What do you see in the industry?
I think if I look at our own company, I was just asking around, so what do we do with all the videos that I know we generate for, let's say, marketing collaterals and trainings? It turns out the cloud is the really best solution for two reasons. In fact, the on-demand is actually, in some ways, people think live streaming is a difficult problem to solve, but it has one advantage. If you are live streaming, then during the 30 minutes, all of you have to be watching the same content. On-demand actually frees up from that one. You can go home and you can watch it from top of the Everest to down on the, probably not possible while you're scuba diving, but it may be possible while you're on a boat. You might want to watch it, right? What do you do? What happens to your multicast network is pretty much worthless at that point. So it all comes back to dread old TCP/IP and HTTP-based things where you have to actually stream it. So a lot of the solutions that works for live streaming is quite a bad solution when you come to the on-demand. And what we are finding more and more, just like your habit in the home, I don't know, how many people watch DVR at home? So quite a few, right? So why did you opt to go for DVR? Because you didn't find the time, or right after 10:30 when the kids went to bed, probably that was a good time. So this is on-demand, or this is actually a kind of on-demand that you are streaming right from your home. In fact, today's DVR does stream to your TVs, right? So what mostly is happening is in many of the companies, like as Patty mentioned, in F5, I know a lot of these materials are now getting exposed to YouTube, Facebook, and others because it's a free of cost delivery. And only certain, really the content we do have to protect, we do have to actually make sure that it is already distributed within the people that we do take, really should look at it. And that's when the access control becomes critical. And some of the things you can solve even keeping these contents out in the public if there is a true access control and mechanism supports. So when I was looking at this topic of the internal CDN, and I was saying, okay, who actually would require internal CDN? And this could go back to your way. Today, if you have to look at it, do you actually would build an internal CDN, or do you actually try to leverage a lot of the things that are outside with the new technology? That would be almost my questions to all of you people who are doing it. And actually, as a company, we are actually trying to enable those components. That you can use the public network, you can have contents which is private to you. How do you marry these both worlds with access control and network control? That sort of would be what I'll leave as thing right now.
Okay, Greg?
Well, I would say as far as the distribution between on-demand and live, I think we're seeing that a lot of content starts its life as live, although there are these libraries that companies often have of pre-produced stuff that they want to put up. But in the world that we often play in a lot of big companies, a lot of content starts as live and then it wants to go up as on-demand. And the question of whether the advantages of live versus being able to, to DVR it, those questions are interesting questions, but the reality is what we find is big companies, they want to do live, period. They're trying to solve that problem. And it doesn't matter what I think about the advantages of live or on demand. People want both. And they want to solve those problems, and they don't want to hurt their networks. And like Patty was saying, they run into situations like Wells Fargo had where they have this huge motley crew of an acquisition here, a different network here, traditional streaming methods fall apart. So something like a peer assist method can be a great way to solve that problem. What we find is peer assist can have advantages in certain places. On the internet, it tends not to be the dominant way to stream. And then other parts of your network might be multicast enabled, and you might want to go to really high bandwidth. We're finding peer assist tends not to be the best technology necessarily when you start going to extremely high bandwidths. And maybe that's a problem the peer assist folks will eventually solve. And once again, we don't necessarily care which distribution technology ends up working the best in what place. What we care about is making sure that everyone gets the best experience they can have without having to suffer because you have one place with limited bandwidth. As far as the applications people are using it for, one of the questions you asked earlier, we're seeing an extremely wide variety of how people use video. I think it's getting to the point where every single business unit at a company is finding some type of use for video. It can be everything from the HR department with a welcome pack to new employees to marketing events to CEOs giving internal talks to business continuity stuff when disasters happen to everything you can think of. They're finding that video is an important communication medium, and it's what we're finding at big companies now is it's no longer a nice to have, how are we going to solve this problem, how are we going to take care of this. It's just a mandate. It has to happen. It's like asking whether they need a phone system. It has to happen. So we're working with a lot of big companies, and the fact is, big enterprises, there aren't really standard approaches to solving their problems, and it ends up being sort of an analysis of what their particular situation is based on their history of their network, how they do things, and then a question of how to reach their business goals.
Okay. Greg, what do you see with respect to user-generated content versus corporate-generated content? Is there, is it changing? Are we seeing the landscape allowing more user-generated, or do you see it still heavily weighted to?
So obviously on the internet, the buzzword of user-generated content is, actually it's not a buzzword anymore. It was a buzzword years ago. Now it's just something people do all the time. For years, the buzzword in our industry has been employee-generated content, and it's still a bit of a buzzword. It's getting done a lot. We have customers that let all of their employees put in content, usually with some kind of moderation, so that our systems will let the managers of the system decide what actually makes it out there. But I would say right now, the dominant content creation occurs by the media professionals, the folks who are controlling the message, the folks who are doing high-quality productions. But the trend is definitely towards employee-generated content or customer-created content and stuff coming in from the world.
Okay. Patty or Sumandra, what are you all seeing in terms of user or employee versus corporate generated? Do you allow it?
We do.
Okay.
We do ask for it in certain circumstances. We do have some groups that put together their own training pieces and all of that, but we have to review it for policy, for legal, and for brand compliance and all of that before we can make it generally available.
Okay.
Most of the time, since our on-demand tool is an enterprise on-demand tool, we can still target different groups and push a piece of content to that group.
Okay.
But we generally ask that one of the video network producers that is in that line of business and works with that communicator review that video, and that's how we govern it, just to be sure that there's nothing in there that puts the company at risk.
Right.
But we do allow it.
Understandable. Sumandra, any differences?
What I can think about is that I think before user-generated or employee-generated content, the long tail was really a short tail. Now, once you have a user-generated content, there will be 5 people in my family who always wants my kid's soccer game. But those are the only 5 people who care about it. Is there any value in caching it? Probably Akamai caches it, good luck, but it shouldn't be cached. So what do you do with those things? So I think what user-generated video really shows the problems of figuring out, it's almost giving a value to each of those things, and that's a hard problem to solve. A classic caching solutions try to go by hit ratios. It sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. The other way to solve this problem is that, yes, if it is user-generated, can I actually always show it in a non-HD? And some people may not like it. So I don't have the answer to these problems. I think at the end of the day, finally, what all infrastructure people do, you end up making the highway wider and wider. And I think that's going to happen. It has to happen.
And I think you also have to look at, how does it support the business? Is it something that's engaging and useful? Does it support the business? Does it support, what we're trying to accomplish here? And so that in itself kind of weeds out any concerns about just strange content or anything like that. The content really has to have a business purpose. That's what our content delivery network does internally, is deliver things that are business critical or business focused.
Okay. For the audience, how many people have deployed a content delivery network at their company? Looks like maybe half or so. From a user or employee generated, do you have rules and regulations around what people can create, or what they can, say if you've got storage, if they can store it out there in terms of a VOD? Is there anybody who doesn't control that and basically just lets users put whatever they want to out there? I don't see any hands. No one's, at least, well, we do see one hand. Some people are willing to admit it, at least. Good for you. How does that work without having to have really any controls around it, providing people the freedom and the assumptions that they will generally behave?
Well, yeah, I'm George LeVar from Accenture, and so yeah, we let people upload whatever they want to our internal YouTube-like portal.
Okay.
We do make them click accept on the box at the front that says, I acknowledge this is for business content only, and that it's me, I'm doing this, and you can discipline me if I put up something that's wrong. And we also have the report inappropriate content button.
Yep.
So it can self-police.
Okay, self-police. Okay.
And there also are some folks in our marketing group that, they do look around. They don't aggressively police everyone.
Okay.
But they do look around.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I'd have to say from our side, sometimes marketing are the ones that are putting that inappropriate content out there.
Good point.
So I've got a good question on something that continues to challenge us, and it's the dreaded word interoperability. And how is that impacted, right? I mean, I think we may not have called it the good old days, right, when we had a much more controllable set of endpoints. But today, as we move into interoperability or lack thereof, as well as a kind of a bring your own device, what sort of challenges, and how is that challenged in terms of your content delivery, and what sort of problems is that? Assuming it's problems, it may not be, but it sounds like it might be.
Wells Fargo, we don't know yet.
Okay.
We have, there are some pilots going on right now with bring your own device, and we're looking at iPads and iDevices, and because that's, particularly with salespeople, they need that
Sure.
freedom and that flexibility to be able to take their presentations and do the things they need to do. But we're still studying it. There are rumors of bring your own device that I have heard, and they've been confirmed, which kind of, I have to tell you, just surprised me to death. And we're a bank, a huge bank with lots of people, 280,000 employees. How on earth are we going to do that? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see. All we can do from the content delivery side is just ensure that the vendors that support us can give us what we need when the time comes. Mm-hmm. So if we say, okay, well, we don't really know how many versions of this video or how many flavors we're going to need, how many can you do? The best you can do is just kind of peer through the microscope and see if you can divine something that you can require the vendor to either support now or be ready to support. Okay. When you're in a place where we are, which we really are not there, and we don't know because our environment is so controlled. Okay.
And do you support mobile devices, not so much laptops, but more like smartphones and tablets today? So no,
not with video content.
Potentially something like that in the future. As
yeah, definitely. We definitely want to do it, but again, going back to my job is of aligning the communication strategy with the technology strategy. That's a place where the technology strategy has to lead, yeah. and the communication strategy has to align to that. What can we do? What will be allowed on the network? Well, of course, all that's being driven by leadership and the sales and, the folks that are out there serving the customers and everything. So when those decisions are made and technology figures out how to do it, then we align with the content and be sure that we're, adhering to the regulations that they have. Mm-hmm. Again, because we're a highly regulated environment.
Sure.
That's the only way I know to do it.
Okay. Sumandra, from looking at your customer standpoint, and I guess specifically at maybe the non-banking, non-financial, what do you see in that respect? Is that something that is quickly encroaching from a needs standpoint, and how are some of the companies addressing the...
I'm not an IT guy, so I don't know whether it's a need perspective, but I know everybody brings these things and that's their own. So it is in the network. How do they get in? Once they come in, they know the SSID and connect, and there you go. Mm-hmm. So what really happens is that I'm actually mystified by some of these things, and this is something you can actually tell me, is that I always thought if I have access to the content via my PC or by this thing, why is that a big fuss? Why is it different? Because at the end of the day, me as a consumer will be seeing it. To me, some of this, I think it happens when if it is not me, suppose somebody XYZ walks into our company and basically gets access to wireless, and those problems are being solved. But what I think really bring your own device will literally translate in the future is there's very fine-grained policy-based access control. At some point of time, you'll be amazed that when you click on this particular link, it just says you are not allowed to. It actually returns. Now that brings a whole bunch of class of applications and class of devices, and we are actually seeing there's a product in F5 does the APM, which is applications sort of like a policy control engine. It's not earth-shattering. What it really does, and I think there are plenty of other companies, I'm not touting my own company here, it's plenty of other people who does the similar job, is basically to put a fine-grained application control at a network level. So when you try to access this, you coming from an iPad being known XYZ can only do this. You coming from your corporate PC, which is connected via LAN, can do this thing. But it really hasn't been solved always. What do you do when I'm coming from a VPN? Should it be different? Yeah, it's kind of different, but do I know always who in the other side of the VPN is working? In fact, it did happen to me once when my kid actually hit accidentally some send thing which I didn't want to send. So the access control is still not really there. It really detects some of these things. So bring your own device, I think it's a reality. It's whether you like it or not, people are going to bring it in, period. And 10 years down the road, if you tell when our kids grow up and you can't do this thing, they'll simply just look at you and say, what is this? So they will probably armed with, I don't know how many devices. God knows. And all of this needs to be supported. So the final point would be, how do we go about implementing the access control policy for applications? Now, I'll be actually interested to know people who have done this in the field, how complicated it is, and how did you go about it? Because it's one thing to set it up on a box, but when you have many policies, ask anybody who has ever managed network access control list or anything. And I know some people who said, I do this way because I don't know. The last guy added 10,000 lines. I'm adding the 10,001 lines. I don't know what those 10,000 lines before me did. And I have a fear that access control, when it becomes fine-grained, it will be messy. And that will create probably a whole bunch of startups to figure out like what actually is access control policy. So what will be required in industry? One, have a way of creating policies, and B, somebody has to actually check out whether those policies that you said should be applied, is it being applied? And both are an issue at this point. It's a fairly nascent market where everybody is making all kinds of claims, and nobody is really solved all the problems. And banks are probably the forefront of these things. They have to really.
We have to make sure that you are who you say you are.
Yes, and you have to probably also verify that this is what the policy you got. Yeah.
Of course. Sid.
So, a question on that. I'm talking about access control. So, for me, there's a difference between permissions. You have permission to watch it, and to say somebody, I'm sorry, you're on VPN, go away. Because the minute my CEO is at home on their iPad and they can't watch it, I get a phone call.
Right.
Exactly right.
So I'm trying to understand your approach to access control around saying, well, we now have too many video on-demand requests, come back later. And I don't know how I would apply that strategy.
No, that's.
If you all can also repeat the question, because I don't think it gets recorded out there. So do you do a quick repeat of the question before you answer? I know. Shorter questions from now on, Sid.
So the question was that, I'll try to cut it short in a way, is that I think your initial is that what's the difference between permission to a content versus access? And the last part was very interesting to me. I think that really catches the question is that what if my CEO goes back to the home and he logs in through VPN and tries to get a content, and CEO is basically, oh, you're the 51%, sorry, I have 58 and you'll get out of it. Very good question. So I think the access control, and literally a lot of the mobile service providers does know this problem very well. So what it starts with three things. One is who you are, that's the user. Where are you accessing from, that's the location, and what are you trying to access? All these three things has to be looked at before somebody can access this control or not. It is kind of worthless to say it's the old Unix model. This file has read-write permission for Joe. But the Joe coming from, if one of the guys who stole my credit card and tried to be me and bought some shoes in Brazil, who is Joe? So location would have caught it. And banks and many of the credit cards actually do solve that by looking at where the transactions are coming from and who the user is. So the access control system that we used to know before has gotten really complicated. And that's why I think some of the networking devices are actually a little bit in a better positions to actually control some of these things, because they get to see what the traffic is coming from, who is accessing it, how much is the network bandwidth I can support, if it is a networking issue, not always. And that could be an issue in your case if let's say the 51st user is the CEO. If I am he's trying to access a video content, I could transfer some of the other users to lower bit rate and maybe give him some channel. It is possible. But all this requires a policy. This is policy. I mean, I could do it in a probably programmatically hand coding way, but how do you write this thing down when you are actually putting this in?
I would take a different approach and get the load off the network. I mean, my approach would be don't develop strategies where you're not relying on the network. So that's why I was really interested in your access and permissions, because it's like so different from where I would go.
We actually offer a solution to solve the exact problem you're talking about. So we actually do the access control that you're talking about, and we do it just tied onto single sign-on in directories that can have attributes that determine what your rights and privileges are. And then based on that, that determines access. And then based on whether you're on VPN, what location you're coming from, what network you're on, we can then determine, and what device you're on. And we do support mobile devices. We support iOS and Android. And based on all of that information, we can determine how we should pull it. Your idea of loading it off the network is actually dependent on how your VPN works. If you support split tunneling, then that's,
right.
yeah.
So like we say, if you're on the VPN, we're going to split tunnel that video in outside the tunnel and have it come right from a
That's a smart way to do it, and we have a lot of customers that will implement
that.
split tunneling just to accomplish that. We also have customers that refuse to, and what they do instead is they make sure that no VPN concentrator gets overloaded, and they put a media server right next to that VPN concentrator to make sure they can handle whatever load's coming in on the VPN. So all of these problems, before you were talking about that no one's really solved this and a lot of people are claiming, well, we're one who's claiming. So and we think we've solved it. And we have customers using it in the exact way you're looking for.
Yeah, and so Sid, just from our perspective, we also, that's kind of one of the reasons that we use the peer-to-peer, the client-based peer-to-peer, because even VPN, of course, it's not peer-to-peer. But it does, we get the authentication, we get the permissions, all of the stuff around the piece of content, as well as the throttling that the client provides. So we can be nice about it. So if it's the CEO and it's like, we're working to serve your bandwidth right now and we're downloading it, we can kind of give you a message that says, it's coming kind of thing. And so you still get content. My phone calls are, it really takes a long time. And so, our new version is going to solve some of that as well. But that's kind of another way that we approach it.
And that's a great point. What peer-to-peer, that highlights the point that peer-to-peer has some great places where it really shines. iOS devices is not a great place for peer-to-peer video distribution. So you got to go to another technique. Wells Fargo with 250,000 employees, my guess is there's a lot of people who would love to watch this stuff on their Android and iOS. And so you might be exploring additional distribution techniques combined with peer-to-peer. And that has its own set of challenges.
Exactly. That's where you peer through the microscope again and go, okay, vendor, this is the next thing that you get to solve for us.
And I actually talked to Contiki, and they are planning on how
They
to
are.
transcode and transmux out to these mobile devices. So it's interesting you talk about that. Because that was the first thing I asked them. How do you do mobile, right?
Well, are you saying they're doing mobile with peer-to-peer?
Yeah.
Oh, so they're doing an app on the device.
Yeah, they're going to transmux off of the actual...
So that's another philosophy. So some companies, if your company is like, okay, everyone at our company, whether you have Android or iOS, go ahead and install this app and you can join the video. So for some companies, that's perfectly acceptable. With most of the companies we work with, they just want people to open up their thing, click a link in their email on their device, and it should just work, which means you now have one choice, HTML in a browser. And if that doesn't work, then go away and come back to us when some vendor solved that. That's been what we focused on. So if Contiki comes out with that stuff, that'll be great. We'll probably support that. We think Contiki is a great way to distribute video. It's just we don't want to tie ourselves to any particular distribution approach.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo his comment is that we are also trying to look at the world, okay, if everything is TCP and HTTP based, can I solve these problems? And I think there's a good reason for doing so. Remember before the web days when I could be downloading apps for my Windows, and pretty soon I have like 10,000 apps, one for video editing, one for photo and all those things. And then came browser-based app. Why did I love it? Because I could go anywhere, open it up, and it doesn't need to be on my computer. So I think the apps are nice, but we are sort of in a Windows days with there's too many apps now. I have lots of apps in this thing which I don't know. Why did I install them? So if I have to watch Wells Fargo video on an app and another app for some bank, I really don't like that.
Well,
that's a good point.
I would argue there are reasons for apps because of authentication and things like that. Like a bank, you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
But I agree. Someday.
Well, and that's the difference between consumer and employee as well. I mean, as an employee, if you're watching internal video, of course, it's part of the policy and it's internal use only, and you expect, to be sort of scrutinized as to who you are. But I completely agree with you with consumer. If they're going out there looking at the Wells Fargo channel, if we open up a channel that's inside the Stagecoach or something, at that point, it just needs to work everywhere, no matter what. Yeah, exactly right.
Did we have a question back there? I thought I saw a hand go up. A minute.
I was just asking if your solution can actually decide which bit rate the person would get.
Yes. In fact, well, there's a few
Craig,
ways.
if I can get you to just quick do a repeat of the question.
Sure. Oh, so he's asking if our solution can determine what bit rate the person pulls. The answer is there's a few ways to do that. One is dynamic streaming, where it adaptively says, goes for the highest stream, and then if it's having trouble, it'll reduce, and then if the bandwidth picks back up, it'll go back up. That's one approach you can do. The other approach is you can determine a priori what stream they should pull based on some aspect about them. So you know they're coming from your Mexico City office, and you know that you don't want them pulling a high bandwidth stream. They will immediately just pull a lower bandwidth stream. So the answer is yes. And that's part of our smart path. You define all these rules, and we have some customers with very complicated rules. And you also have to define what happens if that stream is not working. So this person from Mexico City is trying to pull this stream and it's not coming. Well, then they should fail over to you decide what, and you laid out all those rules for everybody.
Okay.
I've got one more thing to say about interoperability.
Of course.
Yeah, because here we are, we're talking about all these different applications and these different platforms that people have. And it for the longest time, it fell to us in the enterprise, whether you're the technology side or the business side, to figure out how they all kind of work together. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of started coming at that with giving that back to the vendor to say, here are all the things I've got for whatever reason that I have them, whether it's I did, somebody else bought this or whatever, and now we're all decided that we're going to use it. I have these things. How can we make them work together? And so to pull in that partnership and say, I challenge you to help me figure out how to put these things together. And one of the great examples around how that really plays out is around and about the metrics on people, how people are accessing your content, who's watching it when, and how much of it do you want to know. Yes. We're considering a sort of a business intelligence kind of setup so that we can pull metrics out of the different products that we have and figure out some kind of way to cross them together against the PeopleSoft data that we have or the Active Directory information that we have, so that we're my comment about this, my favorite comment about this is the man with two watches doesn't really know what time it is.
Yes.
And so if all these systems are pulling this stuff and you're looking at clicks over here, you're looking at metadata over here, and you're looking at play, affidavits over here.
Yes.
How do you pull all that together? So that was really the point that I wanted to make around interoperability. And how it could play out is, particularly around the measurement piece, but engaging the vendor to say, I've got all of these things. You guys go off and make some partnerships here, and let's make this thing happen. And that's been very successful for me.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you all about things like real-time monitoring and metrics, and what is it still in its infancy? I mean, are you getting the metrics, or do you have the ability to get the data that you want, or is it more of a situation where you're pulling it from multiple sources and not exactly sure which the single source or the correct source of truth is? Guys, Samantha or
our software does support some deep analytics. We basically, as people are consuming the content, they are sending back analytics to our system, which can be tied to who they are. It can be tied to how they answer polls and surveys, and how many slides they saw, and how long they watched the video. We even capture some quality of service metrics on the video. All of that ends up in a database that's accessible through our APIs. But in general, our customers want to just grab the reports. Our reports, some of them are eye candy, like Google Maps with dots everywhere for where people were watching from. Some of them are, hardcore spreadsheet type reports. You need to be able to download these in a lot of different formats, from PDFs to Excel. You need to be able to give people the ability to click a link in their email and get the report. Sometimes you want them to be able to check on their own, so the business owner of that particular piece of content can check their own stats, as well as being able to pull it into other systems, and we support all that.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
My question to the panelists would be regarding interoperability and then the mobile devices and even the permissions aspect is that coming from kind of a top level down CEO level, like this is what we have to do, or is it, because I come from education where it's a little different in that the students and faculty have these devices and these things, and they say, well, we want this. It's kind of a groundswell from, and then upper level has to say, well, we can either support that or not. But it doesn't come from us saying, you will do Windows Media or you will do, it kind of comes from, so I'm just wondering if you guys.
Yeah, I can speak to the, at least to the authentication piece and the permissions and all of that. Ours is the law. It's regulatory and it's governed by banking regulations, FDIC. There's a whole lot of regulations around how our content, and I'm talking about anything from a pitch document, a book that somebody would create to go out and get business or anything, all of that stuff. Any piece of content that we create is subject to legal hold and review and that kind of thing. And the rights and permissions to be able to view that come from legal. And so the technology group has to figure out how to solve that and make sure that that's right. Now, as far as some internal use content, for instance, a line of business program that's created specifically for Wells Fargo advisors, say, for instance, well, they have their own group in there that checks their content, make sure it's compliant with all their branded policies and all of that. But that distribution then is decided from that group. These are the people that we want to get this content, and so we push it directly to them. So, but as far as what we have to do for compliance purposes, basically ours is law driven.
If I may, I think maybe I misunderstood the question a little bit other way. If I repeat the question, so your question was that is the mandate you bring support your own devices comes from the top, or it is because of the groundswell of people bringing it, right? I think Patty hit it right. It depends on what industry you are. If I am in a military establishment, maybe not possible because of national security reasons and whatnot. But vast majority of the companies, I think they are sort of forced to do it. Not really, I would say, groundswell, because the IT guy who supports the network, he himself has an iPad and a few things, and he wants it. So it starts from there. I'm bringing my own device, and I'm saying, I really don't need my laptop other than few things, and can I just please do these things, right? So I think in many cases, majority of cases is the groundswell, what younger people and more and more people, what used to be before the enterprise used to be kind of a different island versus consumer things. Now these two things are coming together for good things. I think that is a great thing for standards. For far too long, enterprises had their own types of network. If I go back the IBM days, I can tell you some of the networking land which does not exist anymore. And the reason being is that more people gravitate to the same thing, innovations goes there. It gets faster, it gets cheaper too. So I look at the video delivery, I have HTTP-based delivery from iPhone, there's a RTMP or RTSP, lots of this thing. Wouldn't it be nice if it is all HTTP-based? I can tell you for sure, if it is for networking devices, if everything is HTTP-based, it will make their life easier, and actually it will offer it more efficiently. From server standpoint of view, a web server can support way many more connections, a standard HTTP-based connections, than it can support any other video server type of connection. So your scalability would go up. So I don't think it needs to be mandated. It's the ROI, the economics of operation will simply put people, and pretty soon there will be people who doesn't know anything about how to operate that RTSP server. So you won't even find any people who knows.
So my answer is very short. We're driven just by our customers saying, hey, if you don't support iPads and iPhones and Androids, and our competitors are starting to announce that, then we have to do it. And that's what drove us to it over a year ago, supporting those kinds of things. So, and I think at companies, the mandate's just coming probably just from employees showing up with all this stuff, especially executives. So employees show up and say it doesn't work, and everyone's like, yeah, I'm busy. But an executive shows up and says, hey, it's not working, and I couldn't watch the webcast last night. What is this? Get it working. And then before you know it, that makes it to us, usually within 24 hours. Why don't you guys support this? And then we stay up late and make it work.
Yeah.
Okay, and to keep things on time, we will end with the lightning round, right, where all the dollar amounts are doubled. So in 30 to 60 seconds, what are the two things, if you could leave our audience with two things from your experience through this, creating a content delivery network, issues you had, what you've learned over the years, what would it be? What are the two things you would leave the audience with?
Okay. Number one is be friends with IT. That is absolutely the secret to my success. Is IT has always sat with me and sat with my team. I've got 4 guys now. It started out to be me and the IT guy, and now there's 13 of us. So it is as we've taken on more work, but just engage. As a matter of fact, our network guy is the guy who chose the peer-to-peer solution. It wasn't me. Okay. I just brought them all together and listened to them. The other thing that I would leave you with is patience. It's in making friends with IT, that also takes a lot of time because there are a lot of processes. Getting back to the question before is when you're trying to go through and figure out what are you going to support, what do senior leaders want, what are we capable of, how does that go against the policy. A lot of patience is required in that because everybody needs to have a say in it, and that's right. Everybody has a stake in that decision of what you're going to support and where you're going to go, and it just bring a lot of nails and build a lot of bridges.
Nice. Thank you, Patty. Sumandra.
I think I'll say it might sound like a cliche, just prepare to have more bandwidth and look at the internet. What happens on the internet is actually good for your internal network too. So don't try to look at the internet saying that's a different island. It's actually your internet is within the internet too.
I would say those of you trying to solve this problem of distributing content, there is no solution to get your content to iOS devices, to Android devices, internally, externally, to all your offices, preparing for the future, to pick the right format, to pick the right distribution technology. You're not going to find a solution. You're going to find lots of solutions. So the real question you have to ask is, how am I going to combine all these and make it work?
Okay, very nice. All right, I want to thank my panelists here for joining and all the great responses to everything. So Patty, Sumandra, Greg, thank you very much. Appreciate it.